target novelisation today. So we'll take a look at Twice Upon a Time, originally written by Stevan Moffat, and this time novelised by Paul Cornell. It's the most recent episode of new series Doctor Who, and it is in fact the final ever story from the 12th Doctor era, featuring the return of the first Doctor, as recast as David Bradley. Now this is a rather exciting episode of Doctor Who, and one of which that I've literally just done an episode review of a few months ago, because it is essentially our most recent episode. So yeah, I can't particularly recall what I said in that review, because I can't in fact recall that review whatsoever, to be honest. I think reading this book, in fact, just the other day was a little bit of a reminder of what this story was actually about, because I've forgotten the majority of it somehow, and I can't recall anything that I actually said within my review, which, to be honest, I have filmed over 700 videos, I think, for this channel, so you can't exactly blame me for forgetting the sort of minor details that I've said in a review. But yeah, today we're going to take a look at this novelisation, which offers a different perspective of that story, which I think this and many other stories of the new series definitely have a new experience behind it, because it's now been novelised. So first off, and as always, in the description below, I will be leaving the link to buy this from the several different retailers that it is available from. As per usual, much like the majority of the Target novels, I in fact recommend buying this as the physical copy, because they are absolutely lovely. They're so nice to hold as well, a really nice size, great to travel with, and yeah, they've got a really nice retro design on the very front. And the recommended retail for these is £6.99. The current price on Amazon is £5.30. You can also get it on a Kindle edition, so the digital one if you want that, and that's £4.99. You can also get the audiobook version if you've not done your free trial of Audible yet. You can in fact get this whole book for free, so yeah, I recommend doing that if you haven't done that. Then you can also get the audio CD for £15.15 as well, if you like sort of listening to somebody actually read this story. And I do believe that this time it is in fact read by, I'm going to have a look, it is read by Mark Gatiss. Yeah, that's quite interesting. And he's got quite a decent voice, I think, for reading audiobooks, so it might be an interesting one. I've not listened to it as of yet. But I do recommend actually taking a look at this book along with the other book releases that I've reviewed so far, because the design of them is just so interesting and so nice and unique. And to be honest, I'm going to get onto that right now. As always with the Target novel reviews, I'm going to start off this video with a product review of this rather nice looking book. Taking a look at the actual book itself, once again, Anthony Dry has done an absolutely excellent design of this book. Once again, rather faithfully recreates the Target novels that have been seen many, many years ago. So at the very front, we get this rather nice cream design along with the Doctor Who logo. In this rather nice gold embossing, you have Twice Upon a Time at the front with Paul Cornell. Quite surprised it doesn't say from a script by Stevan Moffat at the very bottom, because I feel like that is something that Stevan Moffat would do. Of the Target novelisation logo at the very top, and then of course we have the artwork by Anthony Dry there at the very front, including the 12th Doctor and the first Doctor, played by David Bradley, rather nicely done. And then we have Bill from Thin Ice, which is a rather nice little error that they've put in, much like the majority of the classic Target novelisations that had some rather obvious errors. Then we have the Glass Lady at the top that's been rather nicely recreated. And then the whole of the front cover has this rather nice, once again, cartoon design in there, almost like fire or ice at the very bottom with an intricate dot design there. Anthony Dry's done a very good job on this. And once again, just comparing it to the old Target novelisations there, here you have the first Doctor and the Daleks, or Doctor Who and the Daleks even, and it just looks like it fits in rather nicely. Of course, this one looks a lot more dated because it is, but I just like the way the design is actually done for new series Doctor Who. Then, of course, on the spine, we get Doctor Who, Twice Upon a Time, Paul Cornell, BBC Books, and of course, on the back, we get a quote from the 12th Doctor saying, "Silly old universe, the more I save it, the more it needs saving," of a smaller image of the cover. Then we have the episode itself and a little bit of a summary about that, along with a little bit of information about the story itself, such as it being originally broadcast on the 25th of December 2017. Then we also have featuring the 12th Doctor, played by Peter Capaldi, and the first Doctor, as played by David Bradley, along with some complete information at the bottom. And then taking a look on the inside, the font is in fact rather large compared to the other book releases. It is in fact only 150 or so pages long, I think, yeah, 161, and that is it, meaning that it is probably one of the smallest Target novelisations, and it is in fact one of the ones with the biggest text as well, meaning that it is in fact quite quick to read. And then of course there's the contents at the very front, in case you want to see the titles of the different chapters. They are in fact quite small chapters, as you can see. We have 18 and then an epilogue at the very end as well. For Tom, Doctor, I Let You Go, a rather nice little thing. I don't know who Tom is, who knows, maybe it's Tom Spilsbury from Doctor Who magazine, I guess we'll never know, or we may if he says on social media. But yeah, it's a rather nice design, and overall I definitely recommend this over the other formats, because they just look absolutely beautiful, don't they? I think it goes without saying to start with, considering that this is the 4th book review of the Target novelisation series so far. If you haven't checked out my reviews of The Day of the Doctor, The Christmas Invasion, and Rose, then I definitely recommend checking those out, especially the Rose one, because I think that that is so far the first book in this line, and also my favourite of this line, because I think it's just novelised so well and it is an absolutely brilliant read. This story is a little bit similar to The Christmas Invasion and Rose, because it is a more faithful recreation to the story rather than the previous book review of The Day of the Doctor, which was a rather different take on that story and offered a much different presentation because, of course, it was written by Stevan Moffat. It was a lot more complex and probably and arguably a lot harder to novelise. See, I do understand why Moffat did what he did in that book, because it would be a rather odd story to novelise. However, at the same time, I just found it a little bit too complex for the target novelisation series. Yeah, I guess you can check out that review if you haven't seen that one already. But this one is also a Stevan Moffat story. It is, in fact, as I say, his last possible contribution to Doctor Who, meaning that I was a little bit cautious going into this book to start with, because I'm already aware of what he's done with The Day of the Doctor, and even though this is written by Paul Cornell, I kind of expected something a little bit different, and that is very much the case for this book release, because it is a more faithful retelling of the story that essentially just novelises the scenes that we actually see within the televised episodes. Yeah, I do quite like that, and I think that this episode deserves that, because there is a few nice moments throughout this book. I think that when the 12th Doctor and the first Doctor originally meet, and when he goes into the TARDIS for the first time, and also the beautiful scene on Christmas Day at the very end where all the soldiers rise from the trenches and of course play football on no man's land, that is also a really nice scene. And it's also, more importantly, a really interesting novelisation of Jodie Whittaker's first scene as the Doctor as well. It doesn't in fact change anything. Her first words are still "are brilliant" or something like that, but it's just a different perspective and offers it almost from her eyes, which I quite like, and sort of she doesn't understand what's going on. And also I found it a lot nicer to read the speech as well, because I think it can very much come across in the episode that the speech is very self-indulgent and it is a bit egotistical, and it's also Peter Capaldi sort of coming out of the role as the Doctor and almost saying goodbye to it. And some people liked it, some people hated it. However, for the book, I think it's a lot better to read, because you actually feel like you're in the scene with the Doctor himself, and you can kind of actually understand the way that he's saying, "Oh, hold on a second, Doctor," and it sort of describes the way that the Jodie Whittaker next future incarnation of the Doctor is almost burning up inside him, ready to come out, and I quite like that. I'd really like to see episodes such as The Parting of the Ways, maybe even at the Time of the Doctor, although I think that episode will be a little bit more of a Day of the Doctor kind of book that's a little bit all over the place. But I would like to see a few of the ending stories maybe novelised, as it might do them a bit more justice, possibly even The End of Time, which I naturally don't like that much. It might still offer that story a bit more sort of a nice perspective. I think it will be fair to say that if you're looking for a story similar to The Day of the Doctor in this book release, then you're not going to get it, because Paul Cornell has basically recreated the story in a really nice fashion for the actual novelisation format. I really like the way that we delve into the minds of the first Doctor. There's a few references here and there as well to his different companions, such as Sarah Kingdom and Steven, such as when he grabs the, I think the drink off the shelf, whatever it is, the brandy. He says, "Oh, the last time that he's drank this was with like Sarah Kingdom," or something like that. And I think that you definitely delve into the personality of the first Doctor a little bit more, and because you're not physically looking at his character, I think at a few certain moments you can actually imagine the 12th Doctor being with William Hartnell and actually seeing how those characters interact, because you don't have David Bradley right in front of you kind of wrecking that illusion. And I do notice that Paul Cornell also adds in a few more like and dear boy, like all that. I feel like he adds in a few more of those to make it feel a bit more like the first Doctor, which I think the story itself was actually lacking a bit. It did feel a bit more like a sort of caricature of the first Doctor rather than the actual first Doctor himself, which is understandable because it's not William Hartnell. I think that David Bradley still did a brilliant job with what he had, much like in An Adventure in Space and Time. However, I did prefer him in that a little bit more. I just think that this is a really nice way to actually bring Hartnell into Doctor Who again, because it actually feels like him within this book. One of the big questions that no doubt a lot of people are asking is the sort of sexualization and is the sexism still in this release? And the answer is yes, and I was rather surprised, because I feel that a lot of people have acted rather positively when it's came to this book, and that's because I honestly thought that maybe Paul Cornell had kind of dodged these sort of sexism quotes and maybe changed them or altered them, but it turns out they're actually still present, and quite a few of them, such as the cleaning stuff and say Vicky, I think, not being in the TARDIS to clean anymore, or Polly or something like that. There is a moment where it says Barbara wouldn't be very happy with what the Doctor was saying or something like that, or she wouldn't like, she would stand up for herself and would say, "I'm not going to do the cleaning for you," which I quite liked. I think Paul Cornell did a very good job of that. He's definitely got a good understanding of 60s Who. However, at the same time, no doubt, which will will make a few people uncomfortable, it is still present. The First Doctor isn't really a massive sexist, however, for some reason, he is portrayed within Twice Upon a Time as a bit of sort of an outdated person, which is a little bit unusual, and you can delve into that in my Twice Upon a Time review. I do know I would have actually mentioned that at some point, because it was a very big talking point. But I think the 12th Doctor is also quite nicely novelised as well. You can definitely get into his mind and actually the understanding of he doesn't want to die, and I think that whole concept in this story of you've got these two doctors, both of them don't know if they want to continue their life or not, that is very much more present in this book release, because you actually delve into their thoughts and you can kind of understand their thought processes, which I think was definitely something that this story needed, and at the same time it made me respect it a little bit more as well. The same as the testimony thing, I think I kind of respected that a bit more as well, and the way that the 12th Doctor reacted to this almost resurrection of Bill and how that was sort of a bit difficult for him. I quite like that. We'd also have Rusty in there as well, of course, much like how he was in the actual story, and yeah, much like the actual story itself, he didn't really offer too much. It's annoying because he does make some remark, the Doctor, about, oh, like, we need some type of energy source or database, like the Matrix on Gallifrey. So just go to the Matrix on Gallifrey, fix Hellbent, you know, and just make that at least, do at least one decent episode featuring Gallifrey in the new series. It would help. But I feel that Paul Cornell possibly felt like he was restricted for this book release. I feel like he had to sort of remain faithful to the story because he didn't want to disrespect Moffat's writing or something like that, because that's how I would feel. I would feel wrong actually taking scenes out of a certain story. But that said, at the same time, I feel that considering the way that we had the very nice scenes in Rose and the way that adapted some minor characters such as Wilson the Caretaker, I feel like this story very much could have had a bit more of that. I feel like we could have had some scenes alone with the First Doctor, maybe even a bit of the sort of 10th Planet novelised again as well, maybe even a bit of that actually brought into the story, or sort of just having a few scenes with the Doctor himself, maybe going back to his own timeline. There is this, probably my favourite scene in fact of this whole book, is where the First Doctor goes back to his timeline and you see him setting the controls, and he actually has in his head sort of the, from his perspective, his regeneration taking place and how he was letting go of himself, and he could actually like hear his companions coming in and bursting into the TARDIS, and he could hear them unlocking the door outside, and then sort of the big kerfuffle of them coming in and seeing the Doctor laid on the floor, and he's almost unconscious, unpresent in that phase. And it is a little bit like he's dying. I thought that that was a really creative piece of writing. I really did respect Paul Cornell for in fact doing that. I thought it was really interesting to see, and yeah, I think that for a reason alone, I think that if you want to see a little bit more of the First Doctor, then one, I recommend checking out his stories, but also at the same time, I feel that this episode did give me a bit more respect for the actual TV episode as well, because I feel like it was a nice ending for the 12th Doctor, and I love the way at the very end as well that he's on a battlefield and he's kind of just reminiscing, and he decides, yeah, I want to move on now to this new era, and even as he has that final speech at the end, and he says, oh, the next guy that takes over this body, and he will do this, he will do this, then all of a sudden, unconsciously, that sort of changes to, maybe it will do this, and then by the very end of the scene, she will, and it's just kind of, you have that progression in there, and I really do like that, and I think that it would be great to see how they novelise Jodie as well, because this got me in the mood for Jodie's Doctor, I think. This got me excited for the new era, because it really does feel essentially like this version of the Doctor is dying, and he doesn't want to be himself, like in another incarnation. He wants to be something a little bit more different. I really hope Chris Chibnall sort of carries that theme on. Overall, for the Target novelisation of Twice Upon a Time, I like it. It is a faithful recreation of the story. However, I just wanted a few more scenes in there added. This book is in fact only, I think, 157 pages long, and the font is in fact rather large as well. It's probably the shortest time. It took me in fact a day or two to read, because I got quite involved within the story. The chapters are quite small, and it is a rather nice flowing episode as well. Unlike the Day of the Doctor, that is rather structured and goes to this rather unusual place and has the commentary in there as well, almost in that lecture format. I think that this story, for me, it just may have been a bit rushed. I feel like, considering that this is literally the most recent episode of Doctor Who, it came out literally December 25th this year, well, last year, 2017, so it is essentially only a few months old already. However, we've already got the novelisation in there. I kind of felt like if this was in the next wave of Target novels, it would have benefited a little bit more. Maybe if having, say, Paul Cornell and Stevan Moffat actually sit down and maybe alter a few scenes and add a few more elements in that. I feel like this is sort of a missed opportunity to add a bit more. And episodes such as Rose are a good example of that, and the Christmas Invasion kind of to an extent. I'll have really many external scenes in there that were added as extras, but Rose is the prime example of having those extra bits of padding in there, having those extra scenes, and having, you can quite obviously tell, a very thought out plot and the way that it's been changed for sort of the later half of the series, and even the scenes of Clive. And just check out my book review of Rose if you want to hear more about that story, basically. But I absolutely loved it, and I feel that if Twice Upon a Time was given the same treatment of that, it would have been a much different experience. And it's just, I feel like it could have had more. It could have had more William Hartnell, and it could have been a bit more sort of 60s Doctor Who-esque. I feel it could have had a few more references in there, maybe a tad more fan service, but at the same time could have fixed a few issues. Maybe sent the Doctor back to Gallifrey to see the Matrix instead of Rusty, or just something like that. Basically, the flaws of the story within the actual TV episode are same in this, because it is virtually exactly the same, which can either be a good thing or a bad thing. That's really it for Twice Upon a Time. There isn't really too much I can comment on for new additional stuff, because there isn't really that much. However, I still think that it is a rather nice read, and probably is still up there as maybe above The Day of the Doctor, because that format just still doesn't sit with me too well. So yeah, that's it for the Target novelisation review. The next review will be the final Target novelisation from Wave 1, and it is, of course, The City of Death, the 4th Doctor story. So yeah, this is a classic episode, so that's a little bit of a change, isn't it? So yeah, I will be reviewing that once I've read it. I feel like I've not read much recently due to exams. It would be nice to maybe get more back into that phase again, because it is sort of very relaxing. So yeah, I guess I'll see you all in that Target novelisation review at some point in the near future when I've actually read it, along with some more Doctor Who product reviews in the future as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.